I'm Dr. Liz Stafford, and this is Primary Music in Conversation. My guest for this episode is Jonathan Harris from the Premier Academy in Milton Keynes. Jonathan is the full-time music specialist at this three-form entry school, teaching from nursery right the way up to year 6, and he's been in that post for 10 years. I'm really interested to talk to Jonathan about the sort of things he's managed to achieve over that long time period and also in a bigger school. You may know that I have talked to some other music specialists who also work in three-form entry schools and who've also been in their posts for 10 years or more over the course of this series. So I'm really interested now to see if there are parallels and patterns and things that we can learn that might suggest why those models are working really, really well. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jonathan. Welcome, Jonathan Harris, to this episode of Primary Music in Conversation. Could you just give us a little bit of a flavour of who you are and where you come from?
Yes, thank you, Liz. So I'm a teacher in Milton Keynes, just an hour north of London, as many people will know, which is a very exciting place to work because it's an expanding city, growing year on year on. I studied music at university, like many people. I worked for about 10 years with the Milton Keynes Music Service, had a great time there. And for the last 10 or 11 years, I've been working full-time as a primary music teacher in Milton Keynes. My general interests in music include organ playing, which is my Sunday morning activity, and also directing choirs, which I do some local choir directing, like obviously many musicians do. In my youth, I was a horn player and spent many years playing in orchestras when at university and so forth.
Fantastic. And I don't mean this in a rude way whatsoever, but you absolutely give me an organist and choir master vibe. If I'd had to guess, that's exactly what I would have gone for. Playing to type there, Jonathan.
A very stereotypical organist and choir master, tall, white, British, um, middle class, university educated, tick the box, yes. Diversity, no. I can't do much on that one, but try to be as welcoming as possible. But yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's it's just a general issue in particularly in music education, but also in education generally. Last statistics I looked at, I think, was something like 90% of all teachers are white, 95% of all head teachers are white across the UK. So yeah, I'm also aware of the lack of diversity that's on this screen right now. But we do what we can, and we hope that things will change, for the better in the future. Maybe the children that we're teaching will come up and be inspired to become music teachers themselves, and that's how we're going to change the world, hopefully. So
Well, hopefully.
speaking of the pupils that you teach, tell me about music in your school.
So my school is a three-form entry primary school. I teach music all the way from nursery, the associated nursery with the school. So children aged 3 and 4, all the way through to year 6, obviously. I'm in the very fortunate position of ticking all the boxes in terms of what people would expect from music education within a primary school, as in every child gets a 1 hour music lesson with me, all the way from reception through to year 6. So I'm there as the specialist music teacher. We have lots going on. In addition to that, we've got regular singing throughout the school. We've got singing in assemblies and so forth, but they do have that 1 hour specialist tuition all the way through. We also have a strong instrumental program. So the local Milton Keynes Music Cooperative, who very strong instrumental team, come in and deliver on the standard instruments. As I said earlier, I've been there for over 10 years, and prior to that, I used to go to the same school through the music service. So the instrumental teaching has built up gradually over time from a small amount that I did as a keyboard teacher many years ago. through to the current, where we're pretty much covering all the standard instruments, which is very exciting, including recent developments in the last year or two were oboes and bassoons and French horns, tuba, and so forth, in addition to the standard multiple keyboards and guitars and violins and so forth. So I've been quite pleased with how, and also impressed with how that's developed. I've been able to support that obviously through encouraging children in school, and we do the sort of usual orchestra and performances and so forth. But there was obviously an issue a few years ago. It was building up, and then the whole national agenda was cost of living crisis. Nobody can afford anything, and I'm thinking, oh no, the whole instrumental tuition is doomed, and nobody will possibly sign up. And then that year, which was I think it was 2 years ago now, was the biggest ever uptake of instruments we'd ever had at the school, and we have over 100 around it. That year was around 180 children learning an instrument, as in paying for the group instrumental tuition, which was absolutely fantastic, and that has maintained it for the last couple of years, which is really encouraging. So yeah, I mean that it's very inspiring that that's happened.
And
I've now paused, which hopefully you'll edit out.
No, it's absolutely, we can edit it out. We can just decide later whether or not we're going to, or whether we're just going to let that kind of pregnant pause be in the air. I was going to ask why you think that is, that you kind of bucked the trend there. Is it to do with like the socio-economic area that you're in, or would you say there are other factors at play? Have you got a sense of why it's kind of you've been able to grow those numbers to such an extent?
One of the factors is definitely accumulation over years and children seeing each other perform on instruments. I think that's a big factor. So and again, the big advantage of me being there and seeing all the children across all the year groups is huge. So I can get the children to perform to each other in class. They do little performances within their own class setting, so not necessarily involving me, so to their class teacher and so forth. We do the sort of little concerts and so forth in the standard ways. And also, as part of my sort of general assessment and things like that, I do recordings and videos of children performing. So for example, in the class music lessons, I'll record composition work, but also I can then show that to other classes and say, hey, look what this group did in another class, and then say, so they're using the instruments there, and so the children are seeing across the board children across the school performing on musical instruments, and then you get the bug thinking, hey, I want to do that, I want to do that. And the other thing I was going to say was we're slightly bucking the trend in that the school is located in a socio-economically deprived area, statistically speaking. So the fact that we've managed to get such a high percentage learning an instrument is fantastic, and it's really inspiring. Obviously, as a music nerd, I would prefer to have a bigger balance of more people learning, the woodwind and the brass in terms of a percentage, but it's still a fairly strong turnout. We have a huge number on keyboards, and I think this is an issue in music services in general. Is that why is everybody learning the keyboard and not enough people learning the French horn or whatever? And that's always a challenge, but that's always been the case when I was at music service as well. I mean, I had the advantage of being a keyboard teacher and piano teacher, so getting children learning was never an issue. But you have to work quite a lot harder. And I've been fortunate. The local music service is great, and that they've run some endangered instrument schemes, which our school has been lucky to be able to take part in, and that's how we ended up with a couple of oboes, a couple of bassoons, who then carried on a year later, paying in the standard way for their lessons and continuing that way. And we did the same last year with French horns and tuba. So obviously for music hubs, that's increasingly difficult to fund, but we've managed to get the opportunities there. And the other thing we've had in the standard way is we've had people coming in to do performances. So again, the music service is good at that. Last year was a particular highlight because one of their sort of champion music. I get the wrong phrase here, but some sixth formers basically from the music service, from music groups, came in and they did a tour of various schools doing performance as a group. So it was all year 11, 12, 13 children in July came and gave a performance to the children at school. And that's again really great that the children are seeing children from secondary school coming in and performing.
Yeah, I've spoken to, as you know, several people for this podcast, and a few other people have pointed that out as well. That actually, it almost makes more impact if it's other children coming to play to them than it does adults, professionals, because it's about kind of looking at somebody who is not so far removed from yourself and going, oh wow, I could do that, that would be cool, as opposed to some like 60-year-old person coming in and playing something amazing and you going, wow, when are they going to die?
Yeah,
Because we
absolutely.
forget that when you're 7 or 8, adults, they look really old and it seems like you're never going to be an adult, doesn't it? So yes, I absolutely agree that having that opportunity of especially if it's children that they've got some connection to, so children who are at the school that they're going to go to, or children who have been at their school and then gone on to secondary school, so there's those kind of links. I think that's so important, and that's probably why one of the reasons that you're having this success, that kind of you're throwing everything at it, really, aren't you? You're having your
Yeah,
demonstrations, you're having your like kind of subsidized endangered instrument stuff. So even though you've still got loads of children learning the keyboard, you've still got all this other stuff happening as well.
yeah,
The keyboard's funny, isn't it? Because I always think, why it's like the default first instrument, isn't it? Oh, learn to play the piano, but it's the hardest one. Like, you've got both your hands, you've got your feet involved eventually, you've got two clefs to read, and it blows my mind how many people are like, oh, my child should learn the piano when they could learn an instrument where they only have to read one line of music for a start. It's crazy.
yeah, absolutely. The other advantage I was just thinking is obviously that a lot of the children are much better at playing the instrument than I am. So, for example, I as much as I try to play the flute and demonstrate it, I'm just hopeless, absolutely hopeless. So, if I can get one of the older children to come and spend 5 minutes in a year 3 class playing the flute to them, playing their grade 1 piece or something, then they'll do a much better job than I am, and the children are much more inspired. And it's the live element as well. Well, obviously there are loads of good resources online of demonstrating instruments and learning, what an oboe is or what a clarinet is, but you can't beat actually physically seeing the instrument and seeing somebody in your school playing it. So that really helps.
Absolutely, totally agree. So it sounds like your extracurricular is like absolutely sorted. Are you really happy with where it is, or have you got like niggles about it and things you want to fix and change?
There's always more you can do, and it's about capacity and how much you can take on. If you can try and get more children involved in the group performances, the better. I mean, they participate in the local um, festivals and things like that. Similarly, we've got a very strong choir. The choir go to Young Voices every year, like many schools, and that's a massive catch for getting large numbers. We take 80 children, 70 to 80 children each year to the O2, which is a real buzz for them. And it's really about getting as many experiences of getting for them as possible. So in the next few weeks, the choir's going out to local care homes to perform just for sort of half an hour or so at the local care homes, which is really easy to sort, but it's a fantastic achievement for them. We just nip out in the minibus and you're out for half an hour or an hour, and the impact both for the children but also for the people who hear them perform, the better. And in the usual way, it's one of the things that music departments should be doing, and many of them are, is going into the local community and getting out of school and you know both for the benefit of the local community and the people that are listening, but and as much for the benefit of the children, and trying to get the attitude and the mentality. What can we do to help other people through music? It's not just a case of, hey, look, I can play this or I can do this. Can we go and make some old people happy? Even if they look like, maybe they're deaf and they can't, and maybe some of them look like they're falling asleep, but can we go out into the local community and put a smile on people's faces through music? And hopefully by getting that sort of mindset, it establishes in the children one of the purposes of music, in sort of community cohesion and helping others and so forth. The other thing going on from what you were just saying about, I must say, there's always room for more and so forth. And the other is, of course, cultural diversity within music and music performances. And we've got several children at school who are learning instruments from from the Indian Hindustani tradition and so forth, or particularly songs and singing. And this is a thing that I've been developing over recent years, particularly, is trying to get the children in the class to perform to each other, but not necessarily something that we've learned in school. So it's one of the highlights at the moment is a year one class that are doing this exceptionally well at the moment, and we've ended up with this performance slot each lesson, which maybe just lasts 10 minutes or so, and the children take it in turns to sing a song. And so we've got children who are singing in, Mandarin. It's a very multicultural school, some traditional sort of Islamic singing, and so forth. And it's really fascinating. And it's something I'm trying to increase, trying to develop. And it's definitely, there's always room for expansion on that front. The thing I would like to do in the long term is to be able to offer tuition on some of these other instruments. It's a challenge finding, people that can do this, or the best sort of workshop leaders, for example. One of the things that I do in school, we've got various partner schools internationally that I do collaborative work with. And there's a school, for example, in Kolkata in India, I work quite closely with. And the children over there, they said, "Oh, what can we do as a joint project this time?" And I suggest, well, if there's anything you can do on music, that would be great. And the school basically put on a performance of Hindustani classical music for our children, partly on Zoom, and they gave it like a talk. It was a class of essentially year 4, year 5 children from their side. They gave a talk on all the different Hindustani classical instruments, and it's instruments that they are learning themselves. And then they sent over some videos of it, and they did a little performance, some of them on the harmonium, some of them on the sitar, some of them on tabla, some on the traditional flute that they have over there. And it was absolutely fascinating. And it was learning things that I could never, as a music educator, I could claim that I could talk and tell to people about this through something I've read off the internet. But realistically, I'm not an expert in Hindustani classical music, even though I like it. I can show them videos of the sitar and so forth. But to actually have been taught this by the children of the same age from Kolkata was a fantastic experience. And also, because our school is multicultural, there are several children within the school who have connections with either with India or particularly with Kolkata. There was one girl in a year 2 class that was watching the videos, and she said, "Hey, her uncle owns a farm just like just a few minutes drive away from the school in Kolkata where this school was there." And there was another boy whose family know the school. So it was quite an incredible experience. So developing things like that, those sorts of links, which are really, which make a huge difference. And one of the big impacts I think that music education can develop is this intercultural learning. Particularly by the children almost teaching themselves about it. So through what they know about their own culture. So as opposed to me as a white, educated English music teacher trying to claim that I can tell them all about such and such a tradition in a particular part of a particular culture, the children can actually tell each other about it from their own cultures, either what from what they know themselves or from their family backgrounds and so forth. And when you open that dialogue with the children and between the children, you learn all sorts, particularly about the lives of the children that you might not even know, which is absolutely fantastic. We did pre the issues in yeah, Israel and Palestine at the moment. I had a connection with a school in Jenin in the West Bank, and we did in those days a Skype call to the children over there, and they'd we'd learned a song that they'd suggested in Arabic, and several of our children can speak Arabic, and so we sang them a song in Arabic, and they'd learned a song in English that I'd written, and they sang it to us. They were in the playground in this school in Jenin, and then we had this conversation between some of the children from my school who were able to speak in Arabic to them and so forth about their essentially about their school day, their school life, and so forth. And it's just immediately gets this any sorts of barriers are broken down, and you get this, particularly when you start talking about, say, the school day and your daily life, what your interests are. The dialogue between the children was really fascinating, and also the fact we were able to learn some music that they were engaged in over there, which was really a fascinating experience. And that's an area I'm hoping that I can sort of, that it'll always be work in progress. There's never an end point really, but I can develop or increasingly develop and possibly also encourage other music educators to develop through that. I think it's easier to do than possibly one thinks, because if you take a stand back as a teacher thinking I have to impart this knowledge that I don't actually have on others, but think, okay, what can we learn from each other? What can the children learn from each other? What can we learn from children in other schools and other cultures and so forth? And that's really interesting. Either internationally, I do this through the one of the things is through the British Council Schools Connect program, which is very good. But also within the UK, I mean, I've done partnership work with schools across the UK that, for example, we did some work with a Islamic school in Slough who similarly shared their experiences, and we did a Zoom call together, both with music and the arts as well, which was very interesting. Yeah.
You've given such lovely examples there, and I think it's a really although I noticed that you use the phrase like, oh, in the usual way, and you're kind of you're very chill about this, but actually I think what you're describing is really innovative and is something that perhaps a lot of schools may not have thought of, because you do, I suppose, as you sort of alluded to, when you're the teacher and you're the expert, you assume you've got to teach everything, and oh, I don't know about that, therefore I'm not going to teach it. But what you've done is found a really good way to bring all of those musical traditions in an authentic way, in a respectful way, without it being you sort of hamming your way through it at the best of your ability, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I guess because obviously for the purposes of the podcast, I've been talking to all different types of teachers, and I wonder if it's actually more of a barrier for specialists than it is for non-specialists, because if you're coming from a position where you think you know absolutely nothing about music, then any music is achievable in a certain sense. Whereas if you are a specialist, and I'm thinking certainly, from my background, very kind of classical base, things like, oh, improvising, oh, that's a bit scary. It's just making stuff up though, isn't it? Like if you're not sort of tied into one tradition and you haven't become really expert at something, then you maybe perhaps are not so frightened about the things that you know less about. I don't know, maybe that's wrong, but I just wonder if it actually puts us, especially sometimes, at a disadvantage that we know what we don't know, as opposed
Yeah,
to just being kind of blissfully ignorant of, where the difficulties might be.
there's definitely some barriers that could be put up um, from that respect. Um, it is one of the advantages of working in, for example, in a whole class environment as opposed to specialist group tuition or instrumental tuition. And I think it's one of those you just have to slightly take the plunge and see what's happens without necessarily expecting a particular end goal. Because when you open that door, you're not. If you knew what the end product was going to be, then it sort of slightly defeats the point because you're not necessarily learning. Because the I think the mindset has to be what can we learn from each other, um, as opposed to these children now need to learn this, this, and this. And as a, for example, as a piano teacher or as a keyboard teacher, I can pretty much know exactly where I'm aiming to get the children to be at a particular various stages. But with this, I think you just sort of try and let go of that and see where the journey takes you and see what we can learn from each other. And I think it's a different approach. Um, and it's also an approach that's you're going to avoid the sort of cultural appropriation that way, and the potential dangers of imposing what I think happens in such and such a culture musically. um, um, but yeah, it gives that flexibility, but I think it also opens up the potential of learning things within music education that you might otherwise not learn, and not experience. So it doesn't mean that anything that you're doing there is going to have a detrimental effect to the sort of musical progression that we're looking at through the national curriculum or anything like that. But it could open up, for example, more creative ideas for on your sort of using standard instruments, more creative
Mm.
ideas for singing, particularly, which is great. So you're not necessarily just using the voice in a standard Western traditional way, and it's also got the added benefits of broadening horizons and the whole thing we were talking about earlier about community cohesion in terms of appreciation of cultural diversity, appreciation of different ways of doing things and different ways that music has a role within particular communities or religions and so forth. So
Mm.
it's a huge area, and as I say, it's an area that you'll never get to an end point. You can never finish. That can go on forever, and once and the learning journey within that for each class is going to be slightly different depending on who's in the class
Mm.
as well.
So, it sounds to me like there's a lot of flexibility within your curriculum plan to be able to kind of go off and do these different things. So, do you have a curriculum map? Do you have a structure that you're following, or is it all very kind of
Yeah,
nebulous?
I don't just wing it on a day-to-day basis and hope for the best. But no, I've got a music curriculum map, and the whole idea. I mean, as you'll know from the webinars that you see coming from places like Ofsted and so forth, you're very much looking at musical progress and developing, this progressive musical curriculum. But within that, there's the scope to include and to integrate things like I've been talking about. Um, so for example, even if you were delivering a particular set scheme of work for myself, because I've got a 1 hour music lesson with each class, as I say, for that year one class, there's absolutely no reason why 10 minutes or so that can't be the children performing to each other of something that they know from their own side and so forth. And there are other things that I include as part of the music curriculum performance. So one of the things connected to what I've been talking about is our participation in the Global Science Opera project, which is an annual um, um, it's an annual event, I suppose, but basically there are various schools and universities around the world who get together and create an opera on a science or sustainability theme each year. And my school I've been in that since it started 10 years ago, involved with that. So for example, this year um, there'll be a performance in November. We tend to do a live performance at our school. Some of them are pre-recorded, and we're creating an opera on this year is the International Year of Glacier Preservation. So the opera is called H2O, as in water. And we're creating a storyline. I had a meeting about it the other day, a storyline to do with glaciers, and creating a sort of general opera storyline, and then different schools and work together to create scenes, not necessarily music, but mine is predominantly music based, so it's musical arts or drama on part of that storyline, and then this is all put together and ends up being about a 1.5 2 hour opera that's performed in November each year. So in that way you take an idea from a sustainability theme, in this case needing to preserve glaciers and have clean water and the importance of water in the world, and you use that as a stimulus for creating a scene. So for mine, it's going to be my default creation is to do a song. So we're going to create a song on that theme that my year fives will perform. So we get the whole of year five involved. So there'll be about sort of 80, 90 children to perform that, and we'll share that. And through that, they'll learn about the sort of themes connected to that. But they'll also get to know children from other parts of the world who are involved in the opera, who are creating, say, artwork or drama scenes or other songs for different parts of that opera. And then we end up doing some Zoom calls. I've got a good connection with the school in Australia, for example, and we always do a Zoom call with them, and they tell us what they've been creating on that theme. Sometimes we do a shared dance project within that, which I have the pleasure of trying to coordinate as well. Even though I can't dance, but I can tell the children how to do it by watching a video that somebody's created about it on a similar theme. So that sort of project, again, it's getting creativity in music and performing and linking music to sustainability themes, and also through that the sort of intercultural learning that we were talking about earlier by developing international connections through that.
So one of the things that has become a bit of a theme in these conversations is transition, which I didn't originally think would be, because it's a primary podcast, but it's sort of gone in that direction kind of naturally with most of the conversations I've had with people so far. And I'm just wondering, because you've got all this incredible stuff happening, if you have transition links with the secondary schools that your year sixes go on to, if they appreciate all the stuff that you've done, how is that working? Is there any connection at all?
Transition is a huge challenge in Milton Keynes. So obviously we have transitions, and I can tell that secondary music teachers some of the things people will be doing. However, our children go off to so many different secondary schools. It's pretty tricky. I think I could be wrong, but I think that it tends to be around the 14 mark. So we'll have 90 children leaving year six, and they go off to about 14 different secondary schools. So that transition is tricky in that if they were going to one or two secondary schools, it would make my life a lot easier. However, I do know, and we have connections with several of the secondary school music departments. So the easy things to pass on is the information about the instruments that they're learning, etc., which is standard, and that can go through music service and so on. But I do flag with some of the secondary school teachers some of the work that we've been doing. There was a nice connection with, like, last year we did a lot with Arts Award, and a lot of well, in fact, all the children in the year group got Discover and Explore Arts Award linked to music and arts that we were doing. And one of the secondary schools that several of the children went to similarly do arts awards, so it was a nice level that they would be able to carry on to get to bronze, which is just that you can't quite do at primary school because it's from age 11 upwards, so it's difficult to fit that in. So they'll be able to continue that journey for those who went there. But yes, it is the challenge. The challenge is the fact they go to so many secondary schools in Milton Keynes, so it is tricky.
Yeah, I think again, when people sort of think about transition, they very often don't understand that that can be the case. And in a lot of places, it's similar to where I am in the Midlands as well. You could be literally going anywhere, and it then becomes very bitty and very difficult. And the secondary teachers may well appreciate the work that you've done at primary, but unfortunately, they've got 29 other children in that class who didn't go to your primary school and didn't do what you did, and it becomes very tricky for them. But
Yeah.
it's nice where you can make those links, isn't it? And it certainly works better for everybody's benefit if you have those links. But yeah, there's no way you can get around 14 secondary schools and get a strong
No,
link with each one of those. I
no.
I, I will accept. Um, I Bit of a philosophical question here. You've been at that school obviously for a very long time. Have you been at that school for that length of time because of the way it is with music? Or is music the way it is in that school because you've been there for so long?
Um, Probably the latter. So when I started, I was at the school for 5 or 6 years prior to working there full time with my work through music service. So things did build up a little bit there, and I was doing some whole class teaching with year four, as well as some instrumental group teaching. Um, but but prior to that, their music teaching was at that point essentially classroom led by the classroom teachers or people like myself who were being brought in by music service. It wasn't just me. It was, they'd run the, year three curriculum was taught by music service staff as a buy-in. And then I started there full time. I had the fortune of a purpose-built music room because they were building a new block at the time. So that came a year or so after I started. Very few resources when I started, but I again had the good fortune of having and continue to have very strong support from the senior management team, who invested particularly at the early stage in the resources that we've got. So again, I was just extremely fortunate, really, that at that point they had the funding to be able to get what I wanted, basically, in my shopping list, with things like the standard percussion, the drums, the keyboards, the guitar. We've got guitars, so we can do whole class guitars and so forth. Yeah, so I was just very fortunate, and I'm in a very lucky position that music continues to be supported in the way it is, and I have been given the freedom to teach the curriculum that I would like to teach, basically, which has developed over time. And essentially, you see what works for the children and what's of interest, and you develop it. I think for probably for most specialist music teachers, you don't want to go in and just teach an off the shelf scheme of work. You want to be able to use your own creativity and your own ideas, and also adapt things for the children
Mm.
of the school, and through that way you develop the culture, the musical culture within the school, and say it changes over time. So yeah, I appreciate having having read various things nationally about the state of music education being fairly patchy, and funding challenges and issues of space within the curriculum, within the timetable, that I'm in a more fortunate position than
Mm,
many schools. And if you were looking at uh, a model example of what could happen, then I appreciate that my school is in a strong position there. It's led us to, as I've mentioned before, we're one of the lead schools, the new lead schools for music that's just been appointed, and it's hopefully an example to others of what can be achieved.
mm,
Doesn't mean everything's perfect, but it's in a it's a strong element of the school. Um, and hopefully over time, particularly with the lead school role, we can help influence and work with the music hub and music service to try and improve and increase things in other schools as well.
mm. And on that note, for our listeners who maybe are, I mean, they may be specialists themselves, they may be non-specialists, but maybe don't have the kind of vast amount of projects and kind of particularly the cultural angle and the kind of partnerships with other schools to help with kind of building out the curriculum in an authentic way. Are there some tips you can give us? Are there like, is there sort of go to this place and ask these people and they will help you with it? Where would you suggest people started if they wanted to build that sort of provision?
Yeah, well, first thing to say is you can only do one thing at a time. So so don't try to take on too much. So to just tiny steps, and things build from there. So uh, from the point of view of international links and partner schools, I would highly recommend looking at the British Council Schools Connect program. It's very accessible, very straightforward, and you develop your partner schools in the way that you want. There's not like a fixed way of doing it. It's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be music based, but there's a lot going on there. Linked to that is they have the international award, the British Council International Award, or International Schools Award, which is worth looking at for ideas and the ways schools can develop international links. So that's one thing. The other thing is, just keep your eyes open for opportunities that are on offer. Basically, sign up to newsletters, see what's available, keep in touch with your music hub and your music service, and you never know what comes your way. I was fortunate to get a lot of opportunities through Arts Work, which was the Southeast Bridge Organisation for
Mhm.
Arts Council. Their work has changed recently in the last couple of years because of the funding changes, but I did a huge amount with them, which was a very productive relationship. We've also done some work with the local cultural education partnership. That's
Mhm.
correct. CEP, which will be different in each area. Ours is called Make. So I've done some intercultural project work with them. The other places that I have connections with, I run as part of the music curriculum. I include the Royal Opera House Create and Sing programs
Mhm.
within that. So I do that at various. My exciting one for this current academic year was with I did it with year two for the first time, which with I did Magic Flute. I've never done it with Key Stage One before, and it was absolutely fantastic. I was dreading it, thinking this is just not going to work. It's far too old for them, and it was perfect. They absolutely loved it. So that was a big success this year, and obviously, Royal Opera House, they're creating, and obviously they've got Create and Dance, Create and Design, and I see that they've just produced a new Singing in Schools CPD as well, which is coming out, or has just come out. But their resources and training is free, which is always benefit to schools. And I also subscribe to things like Sing Up because I use a lot of their songs. I find them very useful, and as I mentioned earlier, we go to Young Voices every year. Young Voices is very good if you're wanting to increase your numbers in choir because it's very popular. Um,
Mm.
the other thing that I found, I would say, just to throw this tip in, because some people find that once you get to year six that sometimes children stop singing or are possibly less enthusiastic about singing. So the two things that I've noticed have really helped this. One was the Create and Sing program. The Royal Opera has I've done all three of them. That to incorporate that into year five, year six, I used it for the Arts Award actually a year or so ago, and it's absolutely 100% participation from the children in year six. You do the videos of the class of them doing the songs, and because you've linked the songs with drama, they're almost unaware. It's so different to just sitting still or standing still and singing, because there's action and storyline and movement involved and expression, emotions, and so forth. They completely 100% participation and everybody joins in. That was very, very useful. And the other thing connected to that is linking the songs with performing arts, just in general, the music, um, the songs from shows or whatever, or linking it to drama. And if you link it to a performing arts club or performing arts activity, then you'll find that the participation level and enthusiasm for singing at year six or at the upper end, where sometimes it drifts off or some people stop, go into their shell a little bit. It completely solves this, and it's a really big impact.
That's a fantastic tip. And who would have thought that, if you went, oh, my year six are going to keep singing because I'm going to do opera. I mean, the world would laugh at you, wouldn't they? But you're absolutely right that those Create and Sing projects are great. Hands up, I wrote a bit of those.
Hey,
So
great.
this is not me going, look how good I am, but through that process of helping with that and going to the school's matinee performance of the Magic Flute, in fact, a couple of years ago, just seeing like you haven't lived unless you've seen 1,000 primary school kids just going crazy for Mozart. It's just
Yeah,
unbelievable, in a way that you could see the performers on stage as well were just gobsmacked with the level of excitement and enjoyment that these
yeah,
children were getting out of something in a foreign language, and not necessarily what the first thing would come to mind if you wanted to do something cool in inverted commas, to get your hard nut year fives and year sixes on side. But definitely,
yeah.
yeah, big that's a big recommendation from me as well for Royal Opera House stuff. It's great. They no longer pay me, so I'm allowed to say that. This is not me trying to create commission for myself. Those
Yeah,
materials have been out in the wild for a while now, and definitely, yeah, schools
yeah.
should check those out. And that's a great tip about the British Council as well, who they've been mentioned a couple of times on the podcast as well. And I always forget they're there. And then somebody goes, "Oh, the British Council." I go, "Oh, of course, yeah, the British Council," and all that kind of arts, cultural alliance, cultural education partnerships, and the work of the organisations that were previously bridge organisations. Yes, absolutely, great tips. Okay, so I guess I have one final question for you, which is, and I dread to ask this because you're already massively overachieving, but what's next? What's on your like wish list for what are you going to do with music over the next year, in your school?
Well, funnily enough, it's almost time to write the next music development plan, which we did as all schools should have done or were advised to do for last year. So, and then you should really revise it every year. So, in the next few weeks, that'll be the next job, ready to get that for publishing in September. Um, the um, from my side, the things I'm trying to develop is increasing the level of linking between of intercultural learning that I was talking about earlier, and trying to increase this across the school, so or across the music learning within the school. So rather than it becoming a sort of isolated um, uh, cases of this, of which there were increasing amount, but that it becomes a more of a common thread throughout the music curriculum, the music offer within school. It sort of is, but I think there's such a large scope for development there, and that area of linking music, intercultural learning, and sustainability themes um, is an area I'm currently exploring myself in terms of research and trying to get to the stage where I hope I can offer some advice or some guidance for other music educators on how to do this and ways to do this. Um, so sort of stepping stones. So because I think there's so much more that can be done rather than just, for example, just singing a song about the environment or singing a song about um, you know, being kind to each other. I think that the level of that's like a gross level of learning, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But I think what music education can offer can be a lot deeper than that, both in terms of the musical development, but also the development within sustainability competencies and things like that. And that's an area that I'm currently researching and trying to come up with some um, good ideas on that will help other music educators. That yeah, it's quite a big project, but we'll work on that. And obviously, the other thing for is that now we've developed this lead schools scheme across the country to see how that develops as well in terms of how can we support other schools, which would be great if we can. Um, to to work together with the music hubs and the music services and get possibly more of a hopefully more of a inter-school development going on because sometimes unless you're in a multi-academy trust, which we're not, you can end up being quite isolated, I think, in terms of what schools are offering within music. So hopefully we can help each other in that way. There's always things to do there. So
Well, that's the life of a teacher. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. That was really fascinating. And I know our listeners are going to take a lot from that. Lots of good ideas and things for developing, particularly that kind of cultural diversity angle, I think is really interesting. And also your extracurricular stuff as well with your endangered instruments. I'm sure that's food for thought for quite a few of us. But thank you very much for your time today and for coming on Primary Music in Conversation, Jonathan Harris.
thank you very much.
Gosh, what an interesting chat that was with Jonathan. I don't know whether to be inspired or terrified. And we did actually have a little off mic chat about that after we finished the recording. And I think it's amazing what Jonathan's doing in his school. But as he was saying, he benefits from the fact that he is the music specialist. He doesn't have to think about anything else other than music. He's been there for a long time. So this is the culmination of all the stuff that he's done in that time period. It's a decade's worth of work. So if you were listening to that thinking, I could never do that, you probably could. It's just going to take you a little bit of time. We are talking in this series to lots of different schools in lots of different positions. So we know that some of you are non-specialists, or should we rather call you generalists, not non-specialists, because of course it's not actually the usual thing to be a specialist in primary school. So you're generalists, really. But that non-specialist kind of label just hangs around a little bit and perhaps makes us feel a little bit inadequate when we shouldn't do. So some of you will be generalists, some of you will be specialists, some of you will be in the school teaching music all the time, some of you will have other responsibilities, some of you will be part-time, some of you will be full-time. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Some of your schools are very small, some of them are humongous, some of you are in a chain, some of you are not. So if you ever listen to one of these episodes and think I could never, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it might that model might not be right for you. It might be something that you might aspire to bits of or all of. But I don't ever want anyone to go away from one of these episodes kind of feeling disheartened. I want you to take what you can get from them. I want you to think about how you can translate some aspects of each person's practice or each school's practice into your own situation if you feel it would be beneficial. And not just kind of find a big stick to beat ourselves with because we don't have an orchestra and we don't have tuba players and we're not writing an opera. That said, if you do have an orchestra, if you do have tuba players and you are writing an opera, that's fantastic as well. That's absolutely great. And you should absolutely 100% celebrate that. So, if you've enjoyed this chat and you want to find our other chats, wherever you are listening to this podcast, you will be able to subscribe, like, download, share, all that malarkey. If you are watching us on YouTube, on the video version, you'll be able to look underneath the video and it'll show you where to sign up for our mailing list if you want to be reminded when episodes go live, and all the other stuff that we do at Music Education Solutions to support primary music. But for now, thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed that episode, and do please join me next time for Primary Music in Conversation. Primary Music in Conversation is presented by Dr. Liz Stafford, edited by Kay Charlton, and produced by Music Education Solutions.